Welcome to the American Operator Podcast, where small businesses are the heartbeat of America. I'm Joseph Cabrera, and we dive into the stories of owners and operators who build and keep our communities thriving. Whether you're new to business or already in the trenches, we'll share the hard-earned wisdom, triumphs, and challenges with running a business in this great country. Let's get to work. All right, team. Welcome to the American Operator Podcast. Another episode en route here with Dr. Daniel Brinchman of, I'm going to get this right, man, Optometric Associates of Texas.
You got it.
You got it, man. I dig it. And, I know if you're watching right now, you'd probably look at Daniel and go like, this guy looks like the coolest doc ever, man. He's got a Jeep shirt on, a goat hat, and he looks like he just came from a Chris Stapleton concert, which he kind of just did. But thank you for being here, making a pit stop to our HQ here while you're stopped by the ACL.
Oh, I'm happy to.
Well, Daniel's in addition to, I think, just being an absolute practitioner of the craft, all things business, doctoring, and then also just making those two worlds come together, an old friend here. And it's been something that offline we often have our own Ted Lasso-isms about leadership and culture and stuff. So we're looking forward to getting into that stuff here later on, especially as it applies to small business. But I think it might be a good place to kick off. Tell folks what that mouthful name that I just did, like what is that? Where are you based? What do you do? All the things.
So the business is named Optometric Associates of Texas. That's the legal name, but we go by Master Eye Associates. It's a little bit more accessible to the market, so to speak. I own and operate a group of 8 offices, and underneath that flag, Optometry Eye Care, and we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. The business itself has been in operation for, I want to say we're crossing over like 30, 33, 32, somewhere in that range years. But operations in Dallas have been going for about 5 years, and I've been a big part of pushing the business up into Dallas and trying to develop that market, different consumer, just sort of pioneering the business in that direction.
Where are the other locations? So you got some of them in Dallas and the rest of them?
Yeah, so originally the business had 14 locations. There were 7 in Austin and 7 in Dallas.
Yeah.
And then 3 years ago, the business split into 2 cities. So I purchased the Dallas locations, and then another operator came in and purchased the Austin locations.
Yeah, perfect.
We're still pretty similar. We're like, brothers.
Yeah.
At this point.
I mean, was that always the goal? Like, did you always think, hey, man, I'm living through life here. I'm going to be a doc. I'm going to learn how to do this stuff. I'm going to go build an empire. Like, was that the whole thing, or was that a little bit more fortune and stuff along the way that got you informed about that life?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think there were foundational clues that would kind of lead to that. There was never, like this is going to happen. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to tackle it. Of course, as I got closer and closer to it happening, you have to pump yourself up to that level. But,
yeah.
It's not like a, senior in high school meeting people say one day, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Not to that level, but.
It's fast. The reason I think I always, generally speaking, I find folks that are in your shoes, regardless if it's a 1 location or an 8 location place, never say it happened by accident, but all of them also said that it wasn't some master plan from the beginning that they architected, almost something in between.
Right.
How do you, maybe let's back it up a little bit. Growing up, was being a doc in this field definitely something top of mind, or how did that come to be?
Yeah, that definitely was top of mind.
Okay.
I was a kid that was always kind of pulled towards the book that had all the different systems in the body, or asking the doctor questions, or the dentist is cleaning my teeth, curious about how this all works. So for some reason, just pulled in that direction. And so that was going to happen. I think eyes, through the course of becoming a practitioner, you start as a kid, you're kind of interested in just humans, and then you have to figure out somewhere along the way that most doctors don't just do humans. They
Which part of the human do I care about?
You want the skin, you want the teeth, you want the feet. So
why eyes?
It's you want the honest thing.
I do. Yeah, totally. Okay. As honest as you can get.
It's clean, right? So in eye care, there's not a lot of mess. There's not a lot of. I tell people there's no bleeding, sick, dying that happens inside of eye care offices for the most part. Occasionally we do.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty weekends. Your phone doesn't ring very much. You know what I mean? So you can have that work-life balance. I think family is very important in being able to kind of unplug is something that a lot of people in healthcare can't do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we saw that through the pandemic. We saw the heroes that we all talked about. We saw them. They were like battling to keep people alive in the hospitals. While all of us were like safe at home in our houses.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like in healthcare, there's definitely, you have to pick, like, do I want to be always on? Do I want to be an ER doc, or do I want to have the ability to kind of like have the white picket fence and like unplug and be with my family a whole bunch? And it's not right or wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's just where's your heart and where's your sort of priorities in life.
That's not a thing I believe that there's probably not a thing a lot of folks think about just in general about careers, let alone especially in the medical field. You know, we have family and friends that are in that field as well, and almost exclusively when they pick something, it was based on what were they exposed to or something in residency that interests them, and then they went to it. But I think going the level beyond that, which is what you do, maybe that's just maturity speaking, going like, well, even though you had to pick it early on, so you probably had that maturity early on, which was, how does this impact like the full, complete Daniel Brinchman picture, not just Dr. Daniel, working in all those things. Are you happy with the choice you made?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Eyes are great. I went to a art show yesterday that was featuring, I forget the name of it, I wish I could tell you, but they were featuring art that was put out by homeless folks from the Austin area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was it, man? Like sculptures and stuff, or?
It was mostly painting,
Okay.
but there was also some different mediums. One of them, the guy had just been arrested and then released, and he had all of this artistic energy that it was going through him at the time.
Yeah.
And he sat outside the courthouse and like drew on a piece of paper that was on the other side was somebody's arrest warrant, so some sort of legal document. And he had that posted. It was so cool. But anyways, at that event, one of the artists had a pretty severe eye condition, and so for many years she couldn't see. And I told her I was an optometrist because she had some different eye pictures, and she goes, "Oh, I just had eye surgery and I can see again." I said, "What do you mean?" And just you could see the artwork before and then the artwork afterwards, and like the clarity in her life like shifted.
Wow, man.
You know what I mean? So I think vision's cool. Of course, I'm biased, but I think we don't always think about how much the vision impacts our work, our leisure, our seeing your friends and family and all those things that are, part of being human.
No, I think that oddly enough, I had a weird thought the other day. I was driving down here, downtown Austin. I don't know if this ever happens to you. I get this like ricochet thoughts. I might be, I was gonna say, I might be a particular interesting, person, but when it comes, I'll get this thing and I go, if I had to lose one of my senses, which is the one that I want to for sure preserve? Sight for sure.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather be deaf, not be able to speak and not be able to smell all day long before losing vision.
Yeah,
because I feel like
absolutely.
I can put the rest together if I have to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think along that same line of thinking, I think maybe if you weren't born with it, it might not be that bad to be okay. It would be bad, but you wouldn't know what you lost, right? If you were born and there was never any vision.
Yeah.
And I've met some folks before that are like that.
Yeah.
There was one woman I was working with in a partially sighted facility, and she had this it almost looked like an old Nokia phone. It had no screen on it. And she was looking off into the distance, not down at the device, and she was like rubbing her hand across it back and forth. And I walked in the room. I said, I saw what she was doing. I'm like, well, what are you up to? What are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm on Facebook.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, and even now, I think with what you see, is it Neuralink stuff?
Yeah.
Just like there's a lot of interesting things, but you think about the prioritization of what technology like that is doing is vision, like it's getting people to see again.
Yeah.
And so it's just being such an immensely engaging and important thing.
Yeah.
When you think about kind of going into the world now of like where you're at today, but maybe just a half step back from that, when you think about going from pure doc into now owner of a practice, what was the thought process there? Why not just stay in that world of just being just a practitioner in the craft and kind of inherit now all the good and the ugly of owning a business?
Yeah, and it's the question that you just asked is an apt one because it's something that in our industry, not just eye care and healthcare in general, with healthcare being part of capitalism in the U.S., that is a big decision point that we go through. And, we check in with each other. 5 years have passed and you see somebody, hey, how's it going? You still working for somebody? You want to practice? Like,
Yeah.
It's a very common kind of like, some folks do, some folks don't. Some folks try and then they realize that wasn't for them and they like back out, and then, you know what I mean? So there's sort of like a back and forth and fluid nature to that, but it's pretty relevant to most doctors.
Yeah.
And I think at a certain point, it probably was around the time where we studied together. I don't know if your listeners know, but we went to business school together.
Yep.
I started to kind of see how, not necessarily MBA concepts, but just sort of fundamental business things that you don't get access to all the time, but you might if you picked up a couple of business books. If you could take that and apply it into the healthcare world, it really makes a big impact, not just on the business, but on the practitioners that are providing care for their patients, on the patients that are receiving care, on their experience, on the employees that work to support that whole thing. And so I kind of came away from that like, this is cool. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even have to go in there with like advanced formulas and spreadsheets and all the stuff that's kind of like traditional MBA thinking. I just had to kind of like get like 3 or 4 principles and plug them in and like watch it like have this huge impact. That's cool. That's fun. Let's do that.
Did you, when you were thinking about, do you have any mentors or folks that you spoke with early on that kind of said, hey, yeah, definitely go into the ownership part of it? I think that is something that you would excel at, or was that you kind of winging it?
No, I think definitely the person that retired prior to us, buying those 2 halves of the business definitely was very influential in being able to, put out those ideas, tell me, hey, like you can do this. Like you're a young dude looking at a 14 location business. Like you're not just staring in the face of a tall dude, you're staring in the face of Goliath, right? So there was a lot of encouragement there. And then, of course, after the transition took place, he stuck around, and I actually still call him to this day. So every 3 or 4 months, he'll get a call, and I always start the call off with, "Hey, you still good with having these calls?" I know.
Just want to make sure, because I know you're trying to retire, and the last thing you might be annoyed right now.
No. He wants the business to be successful. We had a good relationship personally, so
yeah,
he's still on board for now.
Oh, I'm sure he loves that, and I do think that's not something to be underestimated. I know as we're building out this operator network here at MainShares, one of the things that we think about a lot is how important it is and how we can't let it fall to the wayside, having mentorship. Like, there's learning any craft, I think, probably embodies 3 major facets. Interest, like you have to have a passion and interest for that facet of whatever the craft is, everything from like metalwork to being a doc and owning a business. Then the next thing is there's a bit of the academia that's involved in like understanding how the craft works. What are the basics? What are the fundamentals? But the one thing that I think is the unlock that almost all of us just kind of like either don't know about or we let it kind of fall to the wayside is the seeking those who've come before us mentality. Because I do think there is so much you can't. I mean, how many things hit you in the face? Like, how many things did you currently deal with now that you go, well, Joseph and I did not study that in our MBA because there was no class on how you deal with this thing. And the only person who's probably got the answer is a little bit of you just going through it and then probably giving a call to that gentleman and saying, hey, you ever have this happen? That's something that I do think when you look at mentorship, it's important. How do you obviously did a really good job establishing a relationship. Any advice you'd give to folks from your experience when you were in the process of taking over this business? That any advice you'd have on the don't treat the owner as just simply a transaction kind of relationship, that you actually might be leaving a lot on the table if you don't like try to build some kind of relationship here that might allow you some unlock?
I think you have to consider the business not as a security or an asset. I think, which it is, like on paper,
yeah.
Right? I'm not saying that it's not, but the business is the collection of a lot of decisions and a lot of framework and foundation that's been put in place by that operator that was there before you. And how difficult is it to make a successful business? right? Like before we even talk about the one that you've bought, like any business,
Yeah.
what is the likelihood of failure?
Very high.
I don't know, but I would assume it's over 50%. Depends on the industry, right?
Sure.
If it's a restaurant, that owner operator that's selling you the restaurant is like the top echelon because restaurants are so difficult to make successful.
Yeah.
And so just having that baseline level of respect for being able to stand the test of time, I think is probably my first piece of advice towards that owner.
The honor it part, like honor what was built kind of thing.
Yeah, like even if you don't 100% agree, even if you look around and you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to fix this and I don't agree with this, like just shut that side of your brain off. Like you got plenty of years to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So have respect for them and what they've built. And then, you just have to be humble, humility.
Yeah.
You don't know everything. And I guarantee you they know 100 times more than you do at this point, right? Maybe eventually you'll know what they know and then surpass them after years pass and you develop and you read more and you sort of like get knocked down a million times. But for right now, going in and like thinking that you know better how things are going to go and not giving the owner that level of respect for what they've built, I think they'll be more naturally open to working with you, right? I think a lot of this, and I've never been on the sell side, but I think a lot of it, and maybe you can fill me in, there's sort of this like, I'm like letting you take my baby, right?
Oh,
It's
that's 100%.
It's such an emotional connection that the owner forms to their business. It's part of their identity.
Yeah.
And I don't trust everybody with my identity.
No,
Right?
that's right.
I
Especially
mean,
if it's going to stay in the same town. Yeah, no, we get owners, what birthed what we're doing now with this whole operator network thing is a big part of it is an answer to owners that would get to the 1 yard line, almost get ready to sell their business, and maybe do a private equity shop or someone on Wall Street or something similar, and say, "Yeah, you changed my mind." And we go, "Whoa, what happened here?" And they go, "Is the price not right? Terms not right? Like what's not right?" They go, "No, actually, I'm getting way more money than I thought this thing was ever worth. Y'all are moving actually quite fast. Everything's great, except that I just know that if I sell it to this shop, let's call it a big PE, then what's going to happen is like maybe 20% of my workforce is going to get fired day one. You're going to outsource all these things. And I got to go to like church and the grocery store next week, and I got to go see all these people. And that just sounds like a miserable retirement. And there's going to be a lot of drama that I don't want. You know what? I've been great at saving. I'll sell it for parts. I own the real estate, and I'll just go retire and go down to Florida and fish for the rest of my life. And so our answer to this was like, how do we go find the sons and daughters that these guys and gals could wish they could pass the business on to because they care about it, to your point, as their baby. And I think you've identified it even better. It is their identity. It is an extension of who they are. And the idea of just passing it on to anybody is not an easy proposition. My hunch is that the gentleman that you talked to who used to own it probably looks forward to those calls. Because I imagine I was having a conversation the other day with a couple folks, and we were talking about just like natural wiring of people. And some of the folks are just kind of wired as a working breed. Like if you were a dog, they would be like a hunting dog. Like they're just born to do this thing. There's like no other way. And so my guess is that he's probably enjoying the little bit of retirement, but I bet you he looks forward to your phone calls.
Yeah.
I just bet you he does.
Yeah. It's like watching the next episode of the show that you used to love, and you have to wait 3 months between episodes. Yeah, it's on. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's go get it.
Football season. Let's
Yeah.
go.
No, that's right. Which, by the way, man, Texas is crushing right now.
Yeah. Yesterday was a good day.
Yeah, that was a good day, man. So talk to me about, before we go into kind of because I know this is something we jam on quite a bit, the culture stuff and leadership. Talk to me just going back to, I'm just so fascinated with the world of doctoring. Mm-hmm. We had a conversation a while ago, and you had said, you know what's funny about being a doctor? It's actually no different than being a mechanic. And I remember thinking, he's being just really humble about that. And then you were like, no, I'm dead serious. You start breaking it down. What is a common misconception about doctors using that kind of line of thinking there that you kind of, what were you trying to allude to that when you were talking about that? Maybe not allude, but directly say.
Can you clarify a little bit?
I'm wondering, let me say it differently here. I think there's a bit of a mystique of docs.
Okay.
And I think rightfully so. Y'all do great work. I mean, it's like a service. But I remember when you told me that statement, it made me go, Okay, that's not just a humble brag. Like he's saying, "Hey, look, man, I'm no different than this plumber down the road who's learned the craft or whatever it is." Just kind of, if you could just and kind of share a little bit about doctors and how you actually look at it very similar to just learning another trade.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, so I'm not going to take you too far biologically into the whole explanation, but it's set up like an airplane, like the body, or like a car, or like a machine. All of the different systems work together. You've got a cooling system, and you've got like a pump system that circulates the fluid, and then you've got the protective outer coating. And each of those systems have a doctor that's associated with it. Just like you've got like a transmission guy that works on your transmission, and a brakes gal that takes care of your brakes. Like they're very similar.
And you work on the heads-up display,
right? Yeah. we work on that, and the key difference, and maybe isn't a difference now that I'm thinking about it, but I think the key difference is that the psychology and how the person feels inside with what like if you pop the hood and you find that the radiator is blown and you give the news to the person, they're probably not going to be happy.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a little different when you're popping the hood and you tell them that their lungs are done. You know what I mean? Like that's a totally different conversation. And they bring the family in, and where do we go from here, and how am I going to survive? And again, we don't work with that in eye care.
Yeah.
Right. But for the most part, that aspect of it is mechanical, but then you overlay the human sort of psychology and the human experience.
Yeah. So yeah, that in itself is different. I guess unless you
and I'm not going to throw any doctor listeners under the bus here, but some of us are better at both, right? The humanistic side of it and the mechanical side. The mechanical side is extremely hard, right? You have to memorize all of these grids and dosages and percentages and interactions and all of these things, and that's just like to be able to like say like, hey, the radiator's blown, and then there's the whole nother skill set to be able to sit down with the family and have this hard conversation and sort of like take it out of doctor speak and translate it into English, and then have them be able to manage the emotional impact of what happens after you deliver that news. And things that have been kind of interesting to me is how we encourage people past that. So you sort of like deliver the news, answer questions, and then you deal with the psychological impact. Things that help a lot on our side is just simple messages like, hey, we're going to get through this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You're not making any kind of, I've heard docs say, hey, the reason you don't want to get too emotional about anything is because you might be giving false hope. And that's like the worst thing you can do about somebody who's supposed to stay objective. But that statement there is, no, we will get through it. I didn't promise you how it's going to end or what it is, but we will continue to stay with you through the process. And it's amazing how just letting folks know that we'll all have our hand on the steering wheel here. Don't worry about it. I won't let go until we're done.
One of my favorite doctors that from like TV is the oncologist from Breaking Bad. I love when he meets with Walter White. He's just got the greatest, like, Walter's terrified and like, building up his empire of crime and all this stuff he's doing. He goes and meets with the oncologist, and he says stuff like that. We're going to get through this, Walter. We're not out of the woods yet. He says stuff like that. It's great.
No, but it's
I'm sitting there taking notes.
Next time I'm going to use this line. Yeah. But it's the stuff that's the human skills that I think apply to everything in life. I mean, our personal relationships to the business stuff, that we don't spend a lot of time, at least just being thoughtful about those comments. I think we leave it up to, there is a, and I've never put my finger on it, but I do know there is a magic that happens when it's more maybe about setting the conditions by saying some of those things that allow folks to either drop their shoulders and ease or to get that drive to go figure out a solution, where I think otherwise it would just kind of be left to chance or left to, your skills as a eye mechanic, to kind of get in there and make it work. So
it helps unlock, I think, to your point, like a motivation, like your immense fear and uncertainty of the situation blocks your ability to gain motivation. It's almost like this wall that's in the way of, if you can make it to the other side, I can find the motivation to do what needs to be done to fix the issue.
Yeah.
But you're just like knocked down on your back by this whole fear and what's going to happen. And, am I going to lose my sight, or if it's something, am I going to lose my life, whatever it is. And so you can't really get to the motivation side of it. So I think it's that doc's job to like get you over that. Like, yes, I'm afraid with you.
Yeah.
But like, here's what we should focus on, because this is going to be the right path for you. And I believe this is the right path. And also where you're headed, I would go if I were in your situation. That's something I'll say sometimes.
Yeah. I like that, man. Yeah. If I'm in your shoes, this is what I'd do.
Absolutely what I would do.
You're not making any promises about how the outcome will be. What you are saying is, this is the next best step, and I think we often get mired by that. I remember with my time in the service is I do, and I used to share with some of the younger guys and gals coming up, which is like sometimes all you have as a tool, as a leader, is your calm. Like that's it. And it seems very like throwaway, like, oh God, it's so squishy. Because at the end of the day, man, you actually don't really know what to do next. I mean, you don't know how it's going to turn out next. The only thing you got is like, I know what this half step is, and maybe that's all you got. And it sounds like, especially in the doctor world, I mean, they're usually not unless they're routine, they're usually not at the docs for some positive reason. It's usually because something in the plumbing went wrong.
Yeah,
yeah, something went wrong. So what would you do? Well, maybe not redo the whole plumbing, but the next best step, just monitor, start taking these meds, come back in a month.
Right. I think you could do it. I was listening to you there. I'd listen to that.
I appreciate it, man. Well, maybe I wouldn't know what I would pick, man. Maybe I'd be
what would you pick?
What would I pick if I was a doc?
We got feet, skin. We got what else?
Kidneys.
What's the doc that deals with a lot of extreme injuries?
Probably the ER doc or internal medicine.
Okay, maybe something like that then.
Yeah.
Although
That's interesting.
Although I'm not sure, because am I going to have enough time to have those conversations, or is it a lot of stat?
Right.
Maybe not.
So Doctor, we got to get you out of here.
Yeah, maybe it's not that then. Yeah, maybe it's something else. I'll get back to you on that.
Right,
maybe that'll be my next career after this. I'll go back to med
curious.
school. I'm sure you can help me with that. Talk to me about, you buy the business. How long ago was that?
Almost 3 years, so just shy of 3.
So talk to me about that first 30 days as the actual owner.
It's a complete terror. 100% unadulterated, pure terror.
Why?
Because you're hyper focused on the transaction and mine took a year. So a year of like waiting for one day. Almost like getting ready for the wedding, right?
That too.
All that planning. And
Great
then,
wedding, by the way.
And then you have the wedding, and then you like the next day you wake up, you're like, what do we do now? I don't know if it's terror in the sense of the marriage, but
right.
There's that uncertainty. In the business side, it's like you just, okay, like, what do I do each day? You don't know. You don't have a framework for it. Maybe the sellers had conversations with you, kind of say like, hey, it's probably a good idea to check your books once a month and make sure you, send out this before payroll goes out, those kind of things. But like, you don't have a day to day. So like Monday rolls around, the transaction closes on Friday, and Monday rolls around, and now the seller's gone, and you're in that seat that you wanted to be in so bad, and you're like, holy shit, what am I gonna do here?
It's like the dog catching the car, right? You've finally been chasing that car. Now you got it, and you're like spinning on the wheel, and you're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. And then it starts spinning you, and you're like, oh, geez.
What do I do? How did you get through that? What were the day by days that got you one step beyond, one step to the next?
I think a lot of like personal support outside of it. Like my wife is extremely, by my side through thick or thin, and was like, she didn't exactly know what was going on. And I might come home and say like, this fire happened and this happened and this. We'll get through this. She gave me the old Walter White oncology approach. And that support was key. And then again, the seller was there, right? So we negotiated an arrangement where he was on board for a year, and he's still here today, helping out occasionally. But I could always pick up the phone and call, and he was, very willing to help me through that. But yeah, terror.
Yeah. Was any part of that terror? What are the teammates, the employees going to think of me?
I think to some extent, yeah. I'm trying to quantify for you what percent is, maybe 20, 30% of it comes from the employees. But I think, there's going to be different acquisition arrangements that people have. If, I was with the business for some years, and so there's kind of like an understanding that I think people have subconsciously, even if they don't have the news, like they kind of see like where the company is headed and what's going to happen eventually. And so I think there was a lot of that kind of buffering the, who is this guy? But if I came in and I knew nobody and it was like, hey, day one, hi, I'm the owner, nice to meet you, and the old owner's gone, I think there would be a probably much more substantial level of concern for that.
Any tips you have for folks that are, and I see what you mean, you've had a warming period with them that it didn't seem that crazy that like, okay, well, Daniel's now the guy, but he was one of the guys before, so maybe it's not so crazy. But in a scenario, if you were to imagine never having interactions with them, any pro tips you'd give folks just first 30, 60 days, like what would you do to establish that rapport and connection?
That's a great question. And I think it's one that should be part of like a playbook for buying a business. Like you have to nail that part, because at the end of the day, the people inside of the organization, that's the business, right? The clients are the business, and the building is the business, and the computers are the business, and the infrastructure and the network and all the other stuff that built a business. But the people are the core of the business. So you have to have a plan of how you're going to do that. If I were to do it and not know anybody, I would really focus on getting to know people. What makes them tick? What are they excited about?
Like even in a personal way?
Yeah. And I know there's sort of like, well, like we don't need to get to know each other that way because we're going to be associates and I'm going to own the company and we shouldn't cross boundaries. And I'm not saying like, hey, let's spend a couple of days going to learn all about each other. But those early conversations are not about like, hey, what are your job duties? Like, can you write down on this piece of paper what your job duties are so that I have a good understanding of whether you're useful or not to me? You know what I mean?
So I know how to grade you.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's
like,
right.
Just how's it going? Like, tell me where you're from. Like just getting to know somebody, getting to know what makes them tick so that they feel valued, right? Because you're coming in there really wanting to learn about them honestly, right? Not, this isn't a play. It's you honestly have to get to know the people that are going to be a part of your company. And then the other part of that is it lays the foundation for managerial success down the road, right? How hard is it if you have a new boss that's assigned to you in your department and doesn't say anything to you about yourself or doesn't care to get to know you and maybe mispronounces your name a little bit, and then slips a stack of papers on your desk and says, hey, Joseph, this is your new assignment for the week, buddy. Get it done. I'll talk to you on Friday.
Yeah.
No,
it's
how
the
does
worst.
that feel?
It's the worst feeling in the world, right? Where, just asking, hey, how's Lexi doing? Great. Did y'all, and actually say something beyond that. Like, did y'all enjoy that, that camping trip y'all did this weekend? Man, I love this stuff, but the weather was kind of hot. You're like, okay, he actually listened. Like, he actually remembered this thing. He actually gives a hoot. It's such a skill that soft skills is probably the wrong word because it seems unimportant. But that human stuff is so important when it comes to just getting folks to just want to go a little bit more, whatever it is. We do that for each other. I don't know why it's such a mystery when it comes to the friends we hang out with the most, the ones that we always say yes to dinner, even last minute. I don't know about you, but they're always the ones that like really give a hoot. They're the ones that like when I'm sitting there with them, they're actually listening to me. They actually remembered what I said. They actually like, I can genuinely tell they're feeling it with me.
Not just waiting to talk.
Not just waiting to talk, yeah. And just, like, okay, yeah, cool. Anyways, man. So, when are we going to do this? What are we doing for the game next week? Something just really transactional.
Yeah.
It's funny that we don't think those two worlds can exist. It's like our best practices in our personal life that we think they don't apply to business. And the best practices in business don't apply to our personal lives, And I think those are the things that we can get better at. When you think about your team specifically, I know you and I love nerding out about the leadership type stuff. How do you see the difference between leadership and management? Like when you think about what those, as an owner, like when you think about what those two worlds look like, do you delineate a difference?
Oh, 100%.
Okay, what's the difference to you?
Are you talking academically, like
No, not
like theoretically, or are you talking about like in practice?
In practice,
okay.
Yeah, in practice.
Getting somebody to comply with a request and getting somebody to believe in a request.
Yeah,
that's the difference between management and leadership. compliance is management. Believing in the mission is leadership. And definitely post, like the Dan before with the organization was much more management heavy. And now you have to, when you switch over into that operator chair, be more leadership oriented. So
you're much more systems and process,
Yeah.
and these are how you track your KPIs. And if you do all that, I'm managing you well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need both though, do you think?
I think it depends on the situation.
Okay.
Right.
Tell me more.
Well, let's talk about you. You've been to war.
Sure.
Right. There's a time when you can sit with the platoon and give them an order that's, there's no danger and it's just going to be a routine. We're going to head up here. We're going to do a little recon. We're going to turn back around and we're going to come back. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And that's more management. You might draw a little picture of it, hold it up like a
little
UT
cartoon
football
drawing.
coach. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And then leadership, you're being attacked on two different sides, and that people's lives are on the line. There's going to be some degree of management that has to go into that. But am I assuming correctly that you turn on that leadership side more?
Yeah, it's dead on. Yeah, you end up inspiring them through action. And it's not even like you're sitting there going, time to be a leader. Let me turn on my inspiration juice, but it is more of this. It's amazing to me how many of us sit in the owner or the leader seat and we think that we get paid for the good times. And it's like, no, you don't actually. Like, as a matter of fact, like most elementary foundational folks could probably do your job on a good day. It's just systems management. How are things going? Tracking this. Did this get paid? Did this get paid? Doing a meeting and chairing it. That's all very teachable. The stuff that's hard is the stuff that you're actually there for. It's it's the reason when the thing hits the fan is the reason that you are actually there, which is to inspire confidence, which is, again, the leading sometimes is the calm. So I think you're dead on with that. It is just the ability to, I equated it the other day to, let's think about parents, for example. I was actually just talking to one of our other advisors about that, something similar, and I'm just curious if this resonates. Managing your kids is kind of probably some level of do you have the stroller or the food? You kind of have all the things. Mm-hmm. But have you ever seen a little, and I do this with our nieces and nephews, they'll fall on the ground and they'll hit their head. And then what do? First thing they do is they look up at you, right? And almost to see what am I supposed to do right now? And usually, just maybe this is not a good thing, but I'm always like, hey man, you're good. Oh, you're good. That was a good fall, well done. And typically they don't cry. They're tracking and then just keep going about their own. Whereas I've seen other folks that kind of they'll get worried and oh my God, are you okay? And then they'll just bawl.
Right.
I think that's the leadership piece is your people will go, oh, and they look over at you and they go, what's going on? What am I supposed to be doing here? And I think when they see their leader calm and collective about it, they go, okay, maybe working our way through this, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
As opposed to being where is this person? Or they are freaking out right now. I guess I need to be looking for another job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
absolutely.
all that to say that's right.
Well, and I think if I tie that back into what you were talking about with the first 30 days after the business was purchased, you're you don't know if your management hat or leadership hats needed more. And you kind of have to make a conscious decision oh, this just came up. Let me try this.
Yeah.
Right. But then over time, as the months and years and the relationship gets stronger and stronger between you and the employees, you sort of know this is the time where I need to give a little speech, or this is the time where I need to call somebody and give them a kick in the rear end on the phone because of a bad situation that's going to hurt them down the road in a leadership way, not in a management way. Or you might just know, hey, I'm rolling out a new software system and this is going to be 80% management and 20% leadership. And you're just all sending out PDFs, just like we all love at work.
Yeah. Did you update your Google Sheet? Yeah. Yeah. But you got to do it, right? You got to make sure that it's on par.
But just that knee jerk, right, to make sure it's on par. That knee jerk reaction of how am I going to approach this with that split between management and leadership, that has developed over time for sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's every time I know what to do, but when you've done it a handful of times and you start seeing the range of problems. One of my colleagues who has a dad who's been a business owner his whole life, he said that's just all business is. You're a problem solver, and the problems get more and more complex the bigger the business gets, and you just have to solve the problem, move on, solve the problem, move on, solve the problem. He's and eventually you're going to really love it. You're going to like these challenges, and a good one's going to come up, and you're going to kind of ooh, this is great.
You
Let's do
smile.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, you start to think about
I don't
it
think
as
I'm there yet, but
no. Yeah, it takes time to get those. One is probably just building up a baseline and a foundation of like that kind of that pain threshold.
yeah.
And like you just
Right.
got to get good at it, and then you're like, okay, I've established. Now it's a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
It's like when you first start working out, right? Like
Yeah.
it's all painful.
Right.
Yeah, everything hurts and aches, but
No,
then
it's-
once you
it's a
get
lot-
there,
it's a lot like that. It really is. It feels like a muscle being worked out that you develop an endurance for it. This past weekend, I was catching up with some friends here in Austin, and somebody asked me like, "How are you doing?" Like not like casually, like "How are you doing?" but like "How are you doing?" You know what I mean? And I was like, I kind of checked in with myself. I said, "I'm great. I'm great." And that's a hard response to give in the first 30 to 90 to 180 days when you first take over. But
and you're
you-
saying
you
that's
get
okay
there.
though. It's
Yeah,
okay to feel that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like a
I mean,
tornado just came through your house.
yeah. But as long as the business is solid, you don't rock the boat too much, and as long as you focus on getting to know your people, who they are as humans, not as, dropping assignments and changing work on them, it'll work itself out. That's what I believe.
Oh, I believe. Well, I think proof in the pudding. Here you are, 3 years later, man, crushing. What do you do? How about on the home front? What are the expectations? And you got a really special battle buddy that's helping you through here. But like, for those looking at this right now, most of them probably have a significant other that is going to be on the on the ship on the high seas, whether they like it or not.
Absolutely.
What do you do there? Like, what would you tell somebody who's also looking to embark on this idea of owning and operating? What kind of warning odor or what kind of expectations should they shed back at the household?
Well, priorities shift. Well, initially, once you first start, the priorities are going to shift. So if we're saying, let's say she's going to buy the business and he's, going to be the support on the side, he's got to know that her priorities are going to be in the business 50, 60 hours a week, if not more.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have anything to do with how she feels about him. It's got to do with her wanting the business to be successful, under all of her employees to continue to keep their jobs and, to eventually one day make some money and all the stuff that goes into it. And so that partner needs to have that, like, hey, the focus and the priorities are going to shift. It's temporary, I hope, right? Hopefully the spouse doesn't turn into the old Scrooge McDuck and never, working on Christmas Eve. And, I don't think that's the case for most people.
Sure.
But the significant other definitely sort of has to give you that freedom. And then I think the other thing is, like the person who's in that scenario, she bought the business. I think she's got to understand that there needs to be a time where you draw the line and shut off the business. Not like it's a good idea to shut off the business. Not like, hey, can I do an extra hour or not? Like bargaining around what this means. Like you got to draw some boundaries and like stick to them.
Yeah.
Because then that allows the partner who's not in the middle of battle, like they're kind of there, they're hearing the stories, but they're not really on the ship feeling the turbulence that the owner is. They have the ability to kind of like connect with you and sort of like lick your wounds or like encourage you. And then the things that are the foundation for your relationship, you can continue to grow those as well.
Yeah, man.
And I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges post buying the business between the two. If you're in a relationship, being able to understand those aspects of it. I think either the spouse in that scenario, the dude might not, he thinks she's not paying attention because she doesn't like him. No, she still likes you, I promise, right?
Yeah.
And then in her situation, she might not be able to draw those boundaries because being the owner operator is very consuming. Yeah, there's nonstop work. Like at any given moment, there's 100 things on your list. You just have to understand that at a certain time or a certain day or there's whatever it is, the system that you worked out, shut it off. It'll be there the next day.
Yeah.
And I think probably some folks out there who are listening who are workaholics have gone through this, right? Like boss gives you a big assignment. You want to please them. It's due on Friday and you really want to get it done, but you got to stay late on Thursday, and you had some plans with your significant other on Thursday night, and you kind of say, hey, Connie, I got to stay at work late tonight.
Yeah.
So it can happen in the workplace too, but in the owner-operator environment, it's like very pronounced, right? I mean, with the people that you talk to, do you hear that?
All the time, man. And if anything, we see that we can see that stuff come unraveled. I was actually talking to an aspiring operator here, and things just kind of went awry because the Cliff Notes version is because things weren't good at home. And so it is one of those things we often say here that some version of this, what I'm about to say, which is, especially in the acquisition side of the house, like a business can be like a lot of the likelihood of a business and a deal closing is completely predicated on the family situation. And so, because those decisions with your board of director, which is the other one across the table at dinner, is like really what's actually where the real decision's being made. And so those are one of the things that we actually take a lot of input into is like, how's your wife feel about this? How's your husband feel about this, right? Especially if they're married, or how's your boyfriend or girlfriend, or how's your family feel about it? And it's the thing I'm proud of here because we do ask that because we just know, I mean, yeah, it's good business for us too because we recognize like that's a major harpoon if it's not good and we want to get line of sight to it. But we also recognize like that's the human aspect of this. It's arguably the biggest financial decision you'll ever make in your entire life. And it can be a beautiful thing because it can create like generational wealth. But at the same time, it's also just not to be underestimated as a big deal. And I do think when you talked about expectations and it's hopefully not a forever thing, I think what helps me, what I try to coach folks on and think through a little bit is treat your home life no different than if it was you running two businesses. If you could think about it that way, how would you ensure those things are integrating well? You wouldn't sabotage one for the other, would you? No. Okay, cool. Then don't do that here. Right. And I look at family life, that's a vocation. Like you being married is a vocation. And so like if you're doing that well, then you'll understand that those two things have to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Usually when and I notice friends of mine, when their home life is going well, God, they're assassin operators. Like they're really good in the workplace.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence that when things are on the fritz, they're not making decisions. They're short with people at work. They're like, those aren't okay. And I think as leaders too, it's important for us to like actually give a hoot about our people. There's times where I think it's important to let your teammate go home early to handle something, because it's not, we'd love to have robotics, maybe, but I think it takes the fun out of running business. But, you could have a bunch of robots in your company and, I guess they would always be doing the things that you need to do. But what fun is that? Like, that's just sounds like a very sterile environment to operate in.
Well, we all see what happened in Terminator when you do that. Skynet comes around.
That's exactly.
You can't have that.
We can't have that. I mean, we can watch that, but we can't have that ourselves. No, I love it, man. I think it's one of those things that that is another thing that I think we underestimate as humans is the importance of making sure those things are good and not always perfect. Just even simple. Expectations. I often find that whether it's in a company or whether it's at home, just not setting expectations, even ones that are hard to deal with, just being able to communicate that can get you to go a long way. Talk to me about, we have chatted about just kind of as a transition into more people stuff.
Okay.
We've had conversations about folks on our teams that are awesome, like humans, but maybe not awesome operators. Like they're or maybe not like they're not maybe the most fruitful teammates. How have you had examples of that in your career, and where have you figured out what to do with this person? It's almost opposite of the brilliant jerk scenario where you have this really hardcore salesperson that's just a poison to the organization, right? Most folks would say you need to fire that person. Believe it or not, it'll bring up the rest of the folks if you can do that. This is almost the opposite question. What do you do with the person that everybody loves that isn't very productive? Have you had any of that in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a hard situation, right? You've got, especially in these small businesses, right? We're not being powered by departments of large number of people, right? So each player in the small business has a pretty important...
Matters a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
So the work that they do has a larger impact than if you were like IBM or Intel, because their work covers so much more, but they might have a strong impact on all the people around them too. And so you're sort of like stuck in this position, like, how do I approach this? What's the best way to go about this? I think identifying the why is really important. I'm thinking of like an athlete right now. Like if they're not performing their best on your team and you know that they should be, like, what's going on?
Yeah.
You know, and if it's, it's not something physical. And so being able to have those open conversations, which again goes back to having that human relationship, right? If you don't have that human relationship, you won't be able to access that. They'll shut down. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
No, we're good. Don't worry about it, Daniel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm working on that assignment. I'll get it to you next week.
Yeah.
So being able to get people to open up and sort of like share what's going on, and then assessing like yourself, what can I do? What can the company do to either support them through that, or to continue dialogues along that line and sort of like make the employee aware that this is something that like we got to work through, right? Everybody life happens to. It happens to you. It happens to me. It happens to everybody you've ever known. We have losses. We have traumas, tragedies, unexpected things happen, right? You drive home and somebody calls you on the way home, and now you've got this news. You got work tomorrow.
Yeah.
You got to show up. And so the things that happen in people's lives, you have to sort of understand, like, what can we do to help? How can we support? Or is this something that's bigger and greater and more related to their attitude or how they feel about the company as a whole or how they feel about themselves? Is this something that we need to bring in a therapist? You know what I mean? Because sometimes it's, you can't be a therapist.
Yeah, it's beyond
Right.
scope there.
But
Yeah.
there's even been conversations like that, like, hey, like maybe it's time to talk to somebody. Like, have you ever reached out to anybody? Well, I don't want to do that. Well, you're hurting. I see you hurting. Like, it might be a good idea. And just a gentle conversation like that can sort of steer things back in a direction where the person starts to heal.
Yeah.
But you got to figure out what the why is, why that situation is happening. And then once you have that uncovered, you can kind of like develop a plan of attack. Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense, man. When you're tripling down, I think how invested. I mean, I know you give a hoot about it, and we've been buds for a while. So I mean, this is not new news to me, but I think for folks out there who are embarking on this or in the middle of it right now, I think they don't recognize that like this is a heavy thing you're signing up to do, right? Being this leader, being this owner, being this operator. It's not something to be taken lightly because you're had my first platoon sergeant ever had, and just a really good friend and a really great mentor of mine is my right-hand man, one of my first right-hand man in the military. Used to always say, he goes, "Sir, your people deserve excellent leadership. Like, that's what they deserve, nothing less."
That's awesome.
That's your job. Your job is to be the very best leader for them possible. And that means a lot of things, right? That means holding them accountable. It means tough love sometimes, but it also means giving a hoot, like in a very deep way, right? Because if you think about it, it is something that it's part of the Rubik's Cube of this business that like you're trying to solve. And part of it is like that one little red square that you're trying to get back. So the other red, with the other red squares. And sometimes it's just one of those weeks. It's just going to take you more time to get it there. But I will also say that it breeds immense loyalty if you can get through that with this person in a way that like you can't buy. Like, but it is not something I think when you're probably in the middle of just like keeping this business running that you always think about. So no, I think it rings loud and clear. Do you think that stuff ever goes away, or do you think it's just always? It just looks different, like those types of human things. Like, does Daniel ever get to the point where he's like, I've solved it all, and 10 years in, I never see this ever again?
No.
Yeah.
I'll just be real. That's my final answer.
You want a lifeline?
I mean, in your family, does it ever stop?
No.
Anybody that's listening to this show, is it ever like perfect for 2 weeks straight? No. You're gonna get in a car wreck. You're gonna have somebody walk out on you. You're gonna have somebody walk in on you. You're gonna have like all of these different life circumstances is part of the human condition, and so that's just a part of it.
Yeah.
And being able to kind of be cognizant of it. You don't have to become an expert. That's actually one of the things that the owner of the company told me before he retired was like, you should probably study some psychology.
That's awesome. Really?
Yeah. Just to understand people and understand their motives and what makes them tick, because it gets complicated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we just begin to scratch the surface of it with how we interact with our friends and family. There's this deep world of motivations, hopes, dreams, fears, how people feel, what inspires them. And I think that's something that inspiration is a big thing with being able to have a team perform very well. But psychology, which is interesting. I haven't really delved down that path. I mean, I've taken some for my schooling, just some basic courses, but I'm curious if that would be sort of like a complementary skill set of study under leadership.
Yeah, well, I think if you take some psychology courses, I mean, now that you're now you're part of our advisor group here, it might be just something we go bring old Dr. Daniel up. Like, no, we're not teaching eye stuff today. And he's going to dive into psychology. But you're right, that is something that I think we got to highlight, in a way that it's useful and pragmatic. I think people go, oh, psychology, that's really just in outer space and very emotional and like in the spiritual realm of things. But it's not. It's no different than when you ball your fist up in a meeting because you're like, hey, that was my idea. That's psychology.
Right.
Like, okay, let's, it's little things a leader can do, right? If they recognize that there's tension there. I think I did it I saw someone do it the other day. And I think they did a brilliant job on it, which was show that there was an idea that it wasn't theirs, but they called it out, even just for half a second. Hey, this was something that so-and-so did. I thought it was a really great idea. And then we just went right into business. That alone was like the most awesome thing ever. It was disarming. It was credit where credit's due. And then we kept the ship moving.
Yeah.
But it's things that like you don't even think about, but they're
Right.
your teammates in a meeting going like, that was my idea. And they just took it for their own. It's like, no, they didn't. If you're really thinking about it now, kind of like the third layer of psychology, we can talk about empathy for leadership up.
Right.
Which is also like your leader's also got a million things on their brain, and they weren't being malicious. They just literally wasn't thinking. That idea came in their head with 1,000 other ideas.
Yeah.
and
There
they
were
just thought to
4
say it.
fires they were putting out at the same time. It
Yes.
was like there wasn't room.
There wasn't room. But I mean, the way you'd maybe repair that situation if you caught it later is, coming back and being like, hey, I know that was your idea, and just making it right, whatever it might be. But yeah, no, I think we'll definitely include psychology in that realm.
We talk about, one of our favorite leaders in television is Ted Lasso, right?
Yeah, he's the best, man.
What did he put in the locker room in the first season up on the wall?
Yeah, it's the torn letter that ended up getting, more and more, which is believe.
Yeah. And the show, it does a good job. It's a good leadership study. If you haven't watched it before, it's excellent. How that inspired a losing team to become a winning team. And of course, it's not just the sign; it's a collection of everything that happened and everything. But that was certainly a psychology move, and he knew what he was doing. You didn't know what he was doing, and that's kind of fun in the beginning of the show to see it. But psychology is helpful, I think.
It's everything, man.
Got to study more.
Oh yeah, maybe start making that a part of our leadership curriculum there even in these MBA programs. Look, I know we're coming up on time, and I want to make sure that I get this last one in, which has got nothing to do with. No, that's not true. It's probably got a little to do with psychology, but I think it's something you said the other day that this thing is burned in my brain all week, man. But you said if you want passive income, buy stocks. Don't buy a small business. Talk to me what that means.
Well, I hear this, like, you're going to buy a business and get rich, and, oh, look, like, let's buy you were talking about a plumbing company. Let's buy a plumbing company. Like, do you know anything about plumbing? Are you passionate about plumbing? Like,
Oh, the multiples are great.
Yeah, it makes a bunch of money,
Yeah.
I got a good guy that's going to finance me, that sort of belief system. That's going to translate over into how you operate the company, because you're lacking the passion and the drive and the knowledge and the skill set to be successful. And so it's just going to devalue the company over the course of time. It might devalue it on paper. It might not. It might stay the same on paper, but it's devaluing the organization and the marketplace and what it means and what it does for the community, right? If you want to be that kind of owner, no problem. Like, just buy a stock. That's what it's designed
You
to
could be an owner in that. Yeah, that's right.
Buy a share in Apple, and now you've got a piece of a company. You're an owner, and you can be a passive income owner. But if you want to roll up your sleeves and you want to get with the people and listen to them and help them and coach them and guide them and direct them in new directions and implement things alongside them and ride this sort of excitement and passion along the way with the value of the company rising, then buy a company.
I couldn't say it any better than that, man. I think that's one of the things that we pressure test folks for, which is as they're getting down this road, as they're thinking about ownership, why are you doing it? And I think it's the money side of things is an important reason. I think that's okay to want to have these dreams to create financial prosperity for you and your family and for your teammates. I think all those are good reasons. But I think alone maybe is not good. I mean, to your point, there are other ways in which you can generate that amount of return another way, without doing it. And it does. That's actually one of our red flags is when we hear an aspiring operator come through and we hear, I'm just, I've been working for the last 10 years at some big company. I'm just tired of grinding. And, I really just don't know if I can handle any more of the ups and downs of this thing. And I'm just looking to go buy a business and just get that mailbox money. And we go, okay, well then let me educate you on what you're actually signing up for. I think something twice as more painful, way more grind,
Right.
and there's no mail check money some days, if, as a matter of fact, you may end up finding yourself having to lose some money at some point.
Yeah, the check is going the other way in the mailbox.
Yeah, that's right.
Not
If you mean you're
indirection.
putting the money in the mailbox, then I think that's what
mailbox
that's,
money.
we can do that. You're going to sending money to somebody else's mailbox. It's a beautiful thing, and I think it's, I equate it to elite sports, elite organizations in the military, whatever it is. It's to me, I think the right folks are inspired and drawn to this idea of something bigger than themselves, like something harder and something that proves their grit and their potential. I think then operating in ownership is something you might consider. But I think if it is something that you're looking at from a financial engineering thing, I think to your point, stocks is the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just owning a business is inherently different, and it's going to take a piece of you with it, which we talked about in the beginning of the episode with the owners selling you a piece of themselves and their identity.
Yeah.
What's going to, as that owner steps out, their identity will eventually step out and yours is going to step in. You got to be ready for that. You got to be ready to pour yourself into it and sort of become the business and sort of think about it all day and night and eat, breathe, and sleep it. And then eventually do the same thing and pass it on to the next person and let them take over in that role. But yeah, if you don't want that, get a stock.
Get a stock.
There's quite a few we could talk about. You make some money there.
Make some money there. Yeah, you got to give me the tip, man. What? Before I let you go, man. Why do you keep it? Why do you keep doing this thing? For those that have said, I think I do got what it takes, and my mind's in the right place. What's the one thing that maybe surprised you? Maybe it's a couple things, but what's something you're going that just gives me you can't buy that.
Well, aside from what we've talked about a lot, like working with people, I think the other thing of it is I'm a puzzle guy. When I was a kid, I built models or trains or sort of constructed. So it probably was the reason I was interested in the body because of its complexity and all the different organs and systems.
Yeah.
But this the buying the business is this never-ending project. Even if you're building a skyscraper, it's finite. There's the end of the project.
Yes.
Right. But the business, there's no end. It's an eternal project that you just keep to get cranking away at every day. And there's ups and downs and twists and turns in different directions. And there might be 4 projects at once and only one other times. But it's this extremely fun challenge that just, for somebody that really wants to focus on work and do work and be productive and tackle challenges, it's nonstop. So it's very, stimulating from somebody that wants to do that.
Yeah, might be the ultimate puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It just keeps getting bigger, hopefully.
Brother, it's so good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I'm
Joseph.
glad you could. We'll be up I'm sure in the Dallas-Fort Worth area here at some point, but anytime you're back in Austin, always swing by HQ here. And thanks again for being an example of I think what being someone who's truly invested in the craft, not only of ownership, but just leadership stuff. And then also just being, as we used to say in the service, just a good dude. I mean, somebody who I think is real about what it takes to do these hard things, while also, I think you've always had a good balance of not taking yourself too seriously as you do it, because this stuff is a lot of just running and gunning and figuring it out.
Right. It is. It really is. Really kind words. I appreciate it, Joseph. One thing that I really like about our conversations, and in this episode, there's probably going to be a couple, but I always leave with one nugget that's valuable that sticks with me. And that's kind of hard. Usually you might get that one every couple of years with a friend. Every time I talk to you, I'm yeah, I got something. I'm going to put that in my pocket and use it one day.
You're too kind, man. Well, I appreciate it, buddy. Well, I'll let you go for now, but in the meantime, man, I know that a lot of our folks will see you again and again and hear from you again, but appreciate the time, man, and safe travels back to Dallas.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the American Operator Podcast, where we celebrate the backbone of America, small business owners and operators like you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss out on more of these stories and insights from people who keep our community strong. Until next time, keep building, keep operating, and keep America moving forward.